Hello, everyone. Good morning if you're on the West Coast, and good afternoon if you are on the East Coast. My name is Franz Hochstrasser. I am the CEO of Raise Green, and welcome to Investor Day. We are here with three incredible companies, and we're going to get into talking with them, sharing their stories with you shortly. But wanted to start by kind of setting the scene with you all. In about 10 days, more than 100 world leaders will arrive in Glasgow, Scotland for an annual global climate conference, COP26. And this will be the first COP since President Biden has taken office and is widely discussed as really being our last best hope to keep global warming well below 2 degrees and make best efforts to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the Paris Agreement goal that all countries of the world have committed to. So there's going to be an enormous emphasis there on the major emitters. This is China, India, and the US, among others, to enhance their climate targets and ratchet up their ambition to really accelerate the global path toward halving global emissions by 2030 and reaching net zero emissions by mid-century. And Raise Green has joined the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero and the Partnership for Carbon Accounting and Financials to push for larger financial institutions and encourage them to take faster progress. But there's still an enormously wide gap between those big banks and those rich investors that say they want to invest in climate solutions and the communities on the ground that really need their capital to build the solutions that will make their neighborhoods more resilient and more sustainable. So while President Biden has restored some of the trust from the global community and American leadership, and by rejoining the Paris Agreement, by setting an ambitious climate goal of 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030, the countries of the world are really expecting everyone to accelerate their decarbonization and ramp up the amount of capital that's flowing to climate solutions. So meanwhile, at home, we are at risk of sending our envoys and our team there to Glasgow to represent the US, showing up empty-handed. So the House and Senate are at loggerheads still over whether there will be a $2 trillion budget reconciliation package, whether they'll pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill that would constitute the largest ever investment in climate solutions in US history. And if it does, the goal is to get 40% of those benefits to help under-resourced and historically disadvantaged communities that need it most. And according to a report that was published this morning from Lancet, which is a leading medical journal, they say promoting equitable climate change mitigation and universal access to clean energies could prevent millions of deaths annually from reduced exposure to carbon pollution, healthier diets, and more active lifestyles, and contribute to reducing health inequities globally. So at Raise Green, we've been strong advocates of pushing for more climate action. And these bills and these initiatives would do that, not just internationally, but right here at home. And nothing less than the fate of our leadership, competitiveness, safety, justness, and resilience of our communities is at stake. So we often say here at Raise Green, we need solutions that accelerate faster than the pace of the problem. And those solutions are within our grasp. So until 2016, they're actually within your grasp. In fact, until 2016, the top 10% of Americans were the only ones that could invest in private companies. But after 2016, with the start of regulation crowdfunding, everyone now, the other 90% of Americans that are non-accredited investors, can also invest in private companies. And we, as Raise Green, are a conduit to help make that happen. Meanwhile, crowdfunding has taken off, growing more than 1,000% over the last 4 years since it launched. This year is going to be the first $1 billion year. And on average in 2021, we're seeing that about 250,000 people use crowdfunding every month. So it's more and more popular and easier than ever to invest online. And that's what the companies you'll see today are making possible for you. So that's where you come in. These climate and societal targets are very achievable, but we do need everybody involved if we're going to get there. And the real action honestly happens one project at a time, one investment at a time. Every dollar that goes towards a climate solution is one less dollar that has to be mobilized later, and one more step toward tackling this problem more quickly. So that's our goal. Today, again, you're going to hear from three amazing entrepreneurs that are making that possible and that have available opportunities on our marketplace. We've also upgraded our marketplace recently, so it should be easier than it has been before to invest. And one last point of compliance and clarification before I turn it over to our MC, our Director of Marketing, Antoine Mitchell, is that you won't hear any of the terms of the offerings that any of our three companies have on the table. If you want to find those terms, please go to invest.raisegreen.com, where you can find their offering pages. And you can also ask questions about those terms there. Today, we're just going to talk about the stories and who these companies are and what they do. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Antoine, who's our Master of Ceremonies today.
Thank you. Thank you, Franz. Really appreciate that introduction, and welcome everyone. Let's get going. Okay, as Franz said, today each issue will share details about their story, the story of their company, and it's your chance to hear directly from them. If you have any questions about the terms of the offering, again, which we will not be covering here, you can go to the Raise Green Marketplace, and that's at invest.raisegreen.com, and find answers there. So let me go through a little bit of logistics. It won't take too long because I do want to make sure that we get the speakers on and in front of everyone. First and foremost, this session is being recorded. So know that within the next few days, you will get a recording just in case you have any questions or you want to go back and listen to anything that any of our speakers have covered. We are a US-based funding portal with offices in Greentown Labs in Boston, Massachusetts, and licensed with the SEC and FINRA to sell private exempt securities. We are the leading US platform focused on impact investing in ESG in the inclusive financing crowd investing industry. We built software with IBM for rapid project creation. Think GitHub for companies and the McDonald's franchise model for solar projects. We've been in business for 3 years and just a little bit over 3 years. Financed with over $1.8 billion in transactions and 9 different security offerings through our marketplace since officially launching in July 2020. We bring investors and companies together in our marketplace, and today you're going to hear from 3 of those companies with live offerings. As the funding portal, we do due diligence on each of the offerings. We do not provide tax, accounting, legal, or financial advice, and we encourage you to review the materials, do your own research, and seek your own counsel before making an investment decision. Okay, that's enough about us. Now it's all about you, and really specifically you hearing about the companies raising money on our marketplace. Just going through the run of show, each one of our speakers will have about 5 to 7 minutes, and then you'll be able to ask each of them questions right after each one of their sessions. And then at the end, we will make sure that we do a final session of Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to liberally use the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen. And we will get to your question if we're able to. And if we're not, we'll make sure that we're able to follow up. And again, please go to invest.raisegreen.com. And ask them directly in the form for each of the company's offering page if it is detailed information about the offering. All right, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Peter Kreisa is the co-founder and chair of the National Energy Improvement Fund and was our first issuer to sell securities on Raise Green. So without further ado, Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Antoine and Franz. Can you see my presentation screen or just my screen the way I'm doing it here? Can you see my screen?
We see just the slides, so you may want to go into present mode.
Yeah, I'm trying to, yes, okay, sorry about that, Franz. Here, all life will be good. Okay, we should be good right now. Okay, thank you very much. And Franz and Antoine, thank you for having us, having us here with your other presenters for this great event. And Franz presented the gigantic and enormous case for climate change and impact on everything else. And what you'll find out with the NEIF, the National Energy Improvement Fund, we may take more of an incrementalist view to this, in the sense that we couldn't concur more with Franz's statements about what we have to do, but in everyday living, in terms of a homeowner, what can they do to make a little dent in carbon impact and everything else? And that's the whole impact of National Energy Improvement Fund and what we're doing. Franz had mentioned we've been the Raise Green's first initial offering and have nothing but, this is my little advertisement for Franz and Raise Green, nothing but wonderful things to say about their process and their commitment to this cause, and the process of getting the ability for retail investors to invest in impact investing. So they've done a wonderful thing, and Franz and Antoine and Jackie and Matt have expanded the team tremendously. Laura Polari has been a wonderful person to work with. So just saying that from an experienced originator on the platform, we couldn't be happier. There's me. And by the way, it's my birthday. So happy birthday to me. This is my birthday present, is that I'm able to present to you guys on my birthday. So I don't have, because I was late on this, but pictures of Matthew Brown, who's my co-chair and founder, and Laura Nelson, who's our CEO and also a co-founder. But what I want to talk about before I get into all the 7-minute details of our slide is, fundamentally, NEIF comes from the genesis of affordability for essential energy improvements. So while things like solar and Tesla and all that great is fantastic and where we all need to go, everyday people need to make everyday improvements to their home. And our mission is, how do we make those improvements more affordable and entice them and enable them to make the highest level of improvements to their home they can in an affordable way. And this goes back to a long, really genesis of a company that going back 25 years to my family's business, AFC First, that kind of invented this market for energy efficiency financing for residential improvements. We kind of call it the financing twilight zone, where if I'm a homeowner and my furnace has blown or my air conditioner has blown, and this is who we're talking about, us on this call, the average American consumer, what are they going to do? This is not high priority. I mean, they would rather put in granite countertops in their kitchen or pay for their kids' college than invest in their energy efficiency. So we have to address that in a way that we can make this incremental impact on their investment and make it affordable. It's the financing twilight zone. All this stuff is too big to put on a credit card, too small to get a home equity loan. All this stuff is driven to a large degree by contractors who influence the decision. Their financing that they're offering is typically finance company kind of programs through large national banks and other finance companies that tend to be promotional financing, 0% for 6 months and 38% thereafter, or other very expensive kind of alternatives. So we took the experience we had as AFC First that invented all this stuff, a company I sold 5 years ago now, but it was started in the 40s. And Matthew Brown and I sat down and said, if we're going to do this again, let's do it the right way. Let's really focus on this basic, essential energy improvements and how can that impact climate. So we started the National Energy Improvement Fund in 2018 to finance the transition to efficient, healthy, and resilient homes and buildings. Goes back a long time. It's all about fair, transparent financing. We have a team that we were able to assemble of our old AFC and Harcourt, Brown and Carey team that's done a lot of this. We've done over almost $1 billion in financing historically, all delivered at point of purchase from the contractor perspective and the consumer perspective. So think about yourself as a homeowner or a small business owner. I want to put in something that's going to improve my health, safety, and comfort of my building. I want to do it the right way. How can I pay for it? We are a regulated supervised lender in 25 states. So we are like a bank, but not a bank. We operate commercial financing platforms nationally. And we just last year moved into the resilient market. So you have the energy efficiency market and the resilient market. We moved into the whole Southeast market with a focus on helping people replace their potentially hurricane damaged roof with what they call fortified roofs prior to the event happening. So it's all about our specialty focus as a lender, who probably the only lender in the country focused this way on residential and small business lending for energy efficiency and resilience improvements. You can see that we focus on environment and climate of our, and interestingly, as we do this stuff, it also gravitates to low and moderate income borrowers that, while all of us in this call may be candidates to finance things in their home or not, people that are on a, whether it's low and moderate or middle. I was talking to my daughter actually about this the other day. We all know millennials, we know the housing prices in the world today. It's like, okay, great. All these 20-year-old kids or 30-year-old kids that I know have great jobs, but they can't afford to buy a house because everything's monthly payment driven, right? The real estate prices have escalated. And so they're looking for ways to do things. And when they are able to afford a house, they can't afford to make the improvements they need to make to that house. So when you think about the way this goes down to all income stratas, low, moderate income, it affects everybody. And how can we do this? How can we help make it more affordable? So we provide affordable financing to homeowners, small business, commercials, and nonprofits. And you can see on the little bottom of the thing that right now, through our historical performance, we've done about 5,000 projects. 71% of them have been for heating and cooling, about 30% or 29% for resilience. And that, I think that number is going to shift more as we focus more in the Southeast. It's all delivered through that contractor network. And that's who influences the world that we live in. Because you can have the best intentioned people, but when their furnace or their air conditioning blows, they need insulation, they don't know what to do. So they call a contractor. And the deal here is, how do you get that contractor to be the best? First of all, I need them to be financially and ethically stable. And that's our number one thing, is vetting those contractors. And secondly, how do we get them to be knowledgeable in terms of presenting the best possible project to their consumers? So we have about 1,000 of those nationally that we work with. Aspirationally, we'll probably be up to about 5,000 or 6,000 like we did with AFC a few years ago. Just some numbers. We currently are servicing about $25 million in loans nationally. We've done about $54 million in projects as NEIF that started 3 years ago, about almost 5,000 loans being serviced. We're very active with utility programs, and we're in 25 states residentially. So we have a pretty good scope, really leveraging all the stuff we did before, but we're doing it in a different way. We are doing it as a certified benefit corporation. And that was the biggest thing that Matthew and I and Laura decided on. It's like, okay, there are lenders out there doing things. There are lenders that will finance your heat pump and your insulation and your hot tub and your car. Guess what? We're just going to focus on energy efficiency and resilience improvements, and we're going to do it what we believe is the right way. So we organize as a benefit corporation and as a certified B corporation. And anybody on this call who knows about that, it's not an insignificant process to get that certification, to say that you're committed to sustainability and all the right things. So we're very proud of that distinction. But as you can see on this slide, our application volume continues to grow. We're up to about 4,000 applications this year. We'll be at the end of the year, we'll be at 6,000 applications. There's a huge demand for contractors and consumers for what we call a transparent financing program, because people are tired of this promotional financing stuff. And my one screed or rant that I go on is, when I see these car commercials for 0% 7-year financing, it drives me nuts, because we know that there's no such thing as zero financing. Right? So somebody's paying for it: manufacturer, contractor, consumer, ultimately the consumer. So how can you present this in a way that's more like fair financing, in a way that is also point of purchase and easy? And that's our focus. Interestingly, through the pandemic, our volume was up, but performance remained steady. You can see our delinquency on the loan portfolios that we manage is, essentially nothing. I think that's because we do a really good job of consultative servicing, as well as really financing things that are essential to people's engagement in their home and what they do. Lots of stuff on this slide, but just a high level thing. We currently have about 5,000 contractors. We also do commercial financing in the net nationally. We do special, this is the unique differentiation of NEIF. We have partnerships with states and governments and utilities functions and efficiency, Maine, California programs, New Jersey, we run a program with the state, Colorado, all these states, and then utilities, and you can see the utilities that we work with. We acquired the My Strong Home platform for resilience last year. And then we work primarily for distribution through partnerships with the manufacturers, distributors, and trade associations, all kind of try to focus down to this contractor level. So, we think we know what we're doing. We are using the Raise Green platform, frankly, to help us make this transition to the next level and to fund the programs and other things that we're doing to support affordability in both residential and commercial energy efficiency. We got here because my daughter says to me, Daddy, I think it's great you're starting this new company. And we had raised capital through private investors and all the other things people have done. She said, but I don't have, $50,000 to invest in your company, but how do I invest $1,000? I said, yeah, well, wait, there's this thing called Raise Green. We can figure this out. So we created the platform to really appeal to smaller retail investors who want to make an impact and see that their money is spent directly, immediately in the essential improvements that homeowners and business owners need to make today. So we're very happy to be on the platform and happy to be coming out with this new offering actually on my birthday today. So thank you, Franz.
Thank you, Peter, and happy birthday. I think you got a lot of support and fans in the chat cheering you on, wishing you a happy birthday as well.
Great.
You also got several questions here. Some of them were about the investment amounts as well as the returns, and so we'll answer those by, again, reminding folks that we won't discuss the terms of any of the offerings here, but if you are interested in finding those out, you can go to invest.raisegreen.com, where you can find Peter's offering and you can ask directly in the Q&A section. And Peter will be compelled to answer, as will any others on today. But Peter, you did get a question about international. So how willing are you to take the business model global beyond Americas to other parts of the world, provided you have help for regulatory approvals and funding supports to set up systems for the same business?
Well, certainly that's extremely enticing. I would love to, now that we can all get on airplanes again, I would love to do that. As you know, the regulatory stuff, and thank you for addressing whoever asked the question, that's the number one thing. Like, even like going to Canada, what do we have to do to lend in Canada? Like, what do we have to do to lend in Europe? We don't really know that. So we would need to have the assistance to do that. I think the model is certainly deployable in the same way, as long as the regulatory structure is there, that we can make it happen. So our interest is, yes, we would love to make this a global thing if we could, but we would need help doing that.
All right. Any other questions? Again, you can ask questions in the Q&A module. And if you want to ask questions very specifically to Peter right now, feel free. You can also ask at any point, because again, we will have a final Q&A session at the end of today's Investor Day. Just give it, a couple more questions about some of the details of the offering. Let's see. And a couple other questions. All right, well, keep your questions coming. I think what we'll do now is move on to our next presenter.
Oh, Antoine, maybe quickly, I see one here that's, do you offer loans to co-ops?
Wow, what great timing. That's really actually literally in the last week, right? So we're doing this program in New Jersey. We're running the program for JCP&L, Jersey Central Power and Light, on heat pump and other energy efficiency increases for them in Central Jersey, and co-ops are a big thing. So we thought about this, can we do co-ops? And literally in the last week, the answer is yes, we can, right? So to me, it's about, we are making loans to homeowners that have a vested interest in their property, and the regulatory structure of how they own the property as a single family owner or a co-op owner or a condo owner, really kind of incidental to me, but we had to verify that. I want to be clear that our two programs are owner occupied kind of programs. And then that could be co-op, condo, single family, manufactured home. And then when you start moving into multifamily, that's almost on a commercial division. So it's a separate distinction. But the answer is yes, we can do co-ops today.
Perfect. Perfect. Anything else? A couple more questions, which might be answered at invest.raisegreen.com and that with the offering.
And certainly anybody can reach out to me directly. I mean, just, that's however you think that. Go to raisegreen.com or reach out to me directly. We can talk about the specifics of any questions regarding that.
No problem. Actually, we have another one that just came through. What is the bottleneck for growth in the business?
A very good question. I think it's it's getting past. The bottleneck tends to be contractors, frankly. Contractors who are delivering the product to consumers, and they are concerned about installing things quickly and efficiently, and also getting people to pay for them. But you have to educate them on continuous new processes, on why this kind of version is better than something that they're paying, some egregious funding for. So it's technology. Technology. We have to have art of technology, and I think it's getting the message through to contractors that you can do the best thing for your customer in the easiest way, and it won't cost you any money. And that's just a function of marshaling resources to get that message out to them. So I think it's not much. It's not capital. It's not product. It's communication.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, just for the sake of time, please keep your questions coming through, but we are going to move on to our next presenter. Thank you so much, Peter, again. And of course, happy birthday. 21 looks phenomenal on you. So thank you again. All right, Chaz.
Hello there, Anton. Good to
Hello,
be here.
sir. All right. Peter, if you can stop sharing your screen, and then we will make the transition. All right. Chaz, while you get set up, let me do a quick introduction. Our next presenter is Chaz Peeling, CEO of Soul Solutions, a California-based solar infrastructure provider. Chaz, over to you, sir.
Okay. I'm going to bring this over here to that and present. Can you guys see that?
Not quite yet, but there may be just a little bit of a lag.
Okay. I'm in the slideshow there now.
And if you just make sure you click share screen at the bottom of your Zoom panel.
Share. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So
Awesome.
back to this and to present. How's that now?
Perfect.
Fabulous.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm very honored to be here working with Raise Green and the crew there. We have been watching some of the new crowdfunding as it's worked along over the last few years. And it's definitely been a game changer in the idea of more of a community supported, smaller investment platform. You know, when Dr. Jay Hasty brought you guys to us, it would seem like a real perfect fit with your, you know, specific emphasis on, you know, community-based solar, climate change solutions, resiliency, what I would consider is, you know, more value-based investing. And also the idea that, you know, there is a vehicle for smaller companies and startups to, you know, get their foot in the door and bootstrap, you know, right along with the bigger companies in the bigger markets. It's very much our premises that a lot of the solutions that we see state ahead for community resilience, sustainability, climate tech is very much a localized, approach, starting like right in your community and moving out from there. We have to have a number of ways to approach the challenges we have to really move the needle, for instance, in climate change, and for instance, some of the other issues, very core issues that are going on around the grid reliance, so to speak, with the disasters. So I feel like, your mission there at Raise Green is really supportive of that approach, in a very direct way to support these local companies as they innovate and bring forth new concepts and ideas to present to their audience, starting, small and scaling up and, proving it in the marketplace, proving it with interest from the investors. And, that will help, spread more of sales all around. And basically the economic lift also is just as important. So my appreciations and respect for the Raise Green concept here, and that we get to work with you on this. So we're here in sunny Solar Pioneer, California. That's been somewhat of the lead in the solar business going back quite a ways. Still very big here. And my name is Chaz Peeling. I'm the CEO and founder of Soul Solutions. This started here in NorCal. And our approach all along has been to kind of be more innovative with the idea of how solar is applied. And I want to get into that a little bit more in our slideshow today and what we do. I'm going to talk about our company overview and, where we came from and what we're doing here today in the presentation here. And we're going to start with the problem, what's going on from our view. We're focused specifically more on the California markets, although our markets could be quite national. One of the things that really happened was a huge kind of switch and reality check for a lot of the solar industry in its scaling up. Was much of the solar installation industry here in California really moved into grid type solutions with, for many good reasons, for the mass markets, where the grid was really in place over the cities and suburbs and towns. And a lot of the engineering processes of solar were all about feeding back into the grid. And that seemed like a good plan there for a while, until a number of things started happening around disasters where the grid would go down. And there's been some kind of rude awakenings in general markets and in the solar industry about that engineering concept, because the original solar was basically an off-grid model. And that's where I learned my solar in the off-grid markets in NorCal, some of the pioneers. And it was all battery based when there was no grid. You always had storage, and then you built out your own power system in more of the remote countries, places where there was no grid, and you had to manage your power and really maintain it. The grid tied solar really accelerated the acceptance of solar across a broad range, and has driven huge megawatts, the clean solar power into the grid, as long as you can have a grid to connect to. That model now is really being challenged in a lot of areas, not just California, but all around the world, and certainly in the US, with the PG&E, in this case, California, or any of the utility models where they're really struggling with large amounts of solar being driven into the grid from the edges. And this is just an engineering perception and issue, but it's certainly relevant to businesses and consumers at the end, because that solar investment really becomes not as worthwhile if it doesn't work when the grid's down. And this is really where the shift is going on right now over these last 3 years, with storage and batteries being involved in the solar engineering schematic and integration. And this is happening both on an individual level at the user side, all the way into businesses and larger infrastructure. You know, the utilities even are scrambling to add storage on as fast as they can. So we saw this years ago, and we're developing, solutions for backup power that always had batteries involved. And this is really where the trending started accelerating for us, starting in 2017. We started seeing, like, let's see how we can put more of these solar applications in to places like temporary power, solar generators, backup power, even into events. We started doing a lot of events where we could bring in equipment that, quite frankly, we built these systems. We said, why run a diesel generator, a fossil fuel generator, if you could have a solar power plant that would do somewhat similar with no greenhouse gas emissions? And essentially, that's the core integration engineering of what we do, is most certainly off grid and mostly mobile and deployable. And this is our markets that we built out in NorCal over the last number of years. And the unreliability of the grid has really pushed that. So we're seeing a real uptick on the demand. And then as climate change and greenhouse gas emission solutions are coming on, it's even more important. And we really see the climate tech solutions and the community resilience is very much intertied to that, where we see this is where the market's going, and this is what we want to scale up for more solutions here in California. So essentially, this is kind of our backstory. We are focusing on solar generators, solar battery equipment, solar power trailers, and solar light towers as kinds of solar-based battery equipment with efficient applications for temporary power, backup power, lighting, some other applications that are coming in. They're smartly integrated with this stuff too. And as an alternative, essentially, to legacy fuel gensets, gas generators, propane, and diesel. We're also integrating some of that as a transition because this process is not going to be easy. The go-to for temporary power in all these markets has been, diesel and fuel generators. And to be able to wean ourselves away from there or reduce the usage, we have a hybrid model where sometimes if you want 100% power uptime, you still have to have the fuel genset in the mix for charging, for instance, if the solar's not keeping up with the demand. So that's a lot of our engineering integration too from Sol Solutions. And we've been doing this for a while now. The markets that we look at that are really being identified are, pretty sizable when you consider the idea of what is the market for portable generators in general, and then worldwide. We've got some statistics that are pretty eye-popping there. And now, even, 5-7 years ago, people never even heard of solar generators. We were the first people in California to actually put some of this equipment out in the field, and people go, "What's that?" And they never even seen anything like it. and we showed them it could be done. Now it's becoming more and more like a given that people are understanding that solar paired with a battery might give them, that 24/7 power that is actually the holy grail of resiliency, which is, can my power stay up no matter what? The same thing going into the light tower markets, which traditionally were a diesel light tower. You've seen them anytime there's a roadside or construction or parking or events where a diesel generator is running some big HID lights all the time. And they're put out a lot of carbon emissions. And we have a 100% solar battery solution to that, that'll run lights all night without any fuel at all. And this market now is really taking off, especially in the sunnier zones in California. And with the more support by the progressive government regulations, we see these markets only growing with the regulatory support and the market awareness, which is also what we do. We're educating the public that these kind of solutions actually exist. And that's very much part of our mission at the company. And the market that we're really going after, more than the installation, which is very big in California, is more of the rentals and service model sales into the B&B markets, which is a tougher market. There's a lot of residential market, and we still serve some of this, but we see the next big wave coming, especially in California, around the concept of, solar equipment sales and rentals and service. And when we do a 250-mile circle from Santa Rosa, California, where we are, which includes all the Bay Area and most of Central and NorCal, it's quite a big market right there. And most of the typical rental markets, contractors and event production are all based on, basically the fuel models. So,
Right.
lose my screen.
Yeah, it looks like your computer was updating, but
Hold on. Let
but
me
it's okay.
bring that back.
It's okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
And we have
sorry
just
about
about 30 more seconds, Chaz.
30 more seconds. Okay. Essentially, that's what our business model is. I've had my background doing this for a while. We have some few key people that are with me here. We're a small company. We've got a good advisory board. Dr. Joseph Marino is one of the pioneers of solar. And that's our, basically our portfolio is equipment for sale and rent in the solar and lighting and power. And we do also a lot of services, including our outdoor event production services, use our equipment. We do a lot of tiny home and RV and trailer solarization stuff too. And we're integrating some of the new efficient applications coming in with that. And that's definitely part of the growth factor for the company. We're looking at definitely growing our revenues and have over the last several years. It's we're bouncing back post-COVID, pretty good so far for 21. And with Raised Green support, we want to extend that even further. And we see a definite upside on that, including having a whole fleet of equipment here that we could rent out regularly, producing income and regular, bigger B2B sales stuff. And the final impact of this is that we're going to have a lot of resiliency options for people that can be deployed immediately for emergencies. And we're going to be removing tons and tons of CO2 emissions from the air by replacing a lot of this legacy diesel equipment in the field. So it's my pleasure to be able to offer this, offering to the Raised Green audience and support us to bring back our power and support these climate change and community resilience solutions here.
Perfect.
So I'd be happy to take any questions too.
Perfect. We are going to running a little short on time, so I'm going to encourage everyone to please put your questions in the Q&A module. We have time for just one question, but then we'll follow up. And again, want to remind everyone to go to invest.raisegreen.com and look for Soul Solutions, and then you can ask Chaz as much detailed questions as you'd like. Franz, do you want to cover the question for Chaz?
Sure, yeah. Chaz, thank you for the presentation. You did get a question here from Corrigan, and she asks, Corrigan asks, are solar generators cheaper to operate for customers because of no fuel costs?
Yeah, operational costs, yes, will over time come down versus the fuel cost generators, because you have to keep adding fuel, and we're going to see fuel pricing go up and up, where if you can manage your power with what you can collect from solar, the operational costs will be less over time. That is absolutely true.
Awesome. Chaz, thank you again for your presentation and again being part of the Raise Green family. Let's move on to our last, but not, or at least of our presenters. Our final presenter is Shenge Samunzi, and I'm so sorry if I've not done a good job on your name, but he is the head of strategy for Lumen Energy LLC. Over to you, sir.
Well, good morning, everybody. Well, good morning on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast and in the Midwest as well. I'm sitting here in San Francisco. We're finally getting a little bit of rain, and so hopefully that gives us a little bit of a reprieve from our fire season. One thing that Franz said in his introduction that really sticks out and is kind of aligned with our focus here is this idea of providing access, equitable access to clean energy. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing within this market where, particularly on the commercial and industrial side, it is a bit of a challenge to get access to clean energy or solar, particularly for small business owners or small single tenant owner occupied buildings. And so part of the genesis of this Lumen Energy Project Fund is to provide a vehicle to enable better financing, or at least access to affordable PPAs that actually offer savings for a large segment of this underserved market. So to just kind of give us an overview of the problem that Lumen Energy is facing, and I'll get into who we are and sort of what our purview is. But first, the problem that we're really focusing on right now with respect to our Raise Green fundraising is that about half of the 600,000 commercial and industrial buildings in California require 35 kilowatts or less of solar capacity to support their current electricity usage. The problem, though, is that from a financing perspective, even given the incentives and even given the tax equity investment structure that is designed to incentivize greater investments into this space, projects of this size struggle to obtain institutional financing. We find that the cost of capital ends up being prohibitively expensive to the point where it no longer pencils to get any kind of savings from a PPA. And on top of that, when we're talking about 35 kilowatt capacity buildings, we're really talking about small commercial industrial buildings. When you exclude buildings that are owned by large portfolio holders or asset managers, and we're talking specifically about single tenant or owner occupied type buildings, or we're also talking about a class of building owners that generally can't afford to pay out of pocket for these systems. So with financing directly is out of the question, and paying out of pocket is out of the question, we're really seeing a gap where we just really can't meet. So from our perspective, a solution to this type of problem is essentially a form of securitization where we bundle a number of these PPAs into a single project fund that's debt financed through retail investors such as those here on Raise Green, to be able to make the financing more attractive. And the way that we work with these PPAs, or the way we work with these building owners, is that we structure PPAs with Lumen such that they're essentially become energy subscribers. And so the way that it works for the building owners is that instead of having to bear the burden of the financing themselves, they're essentially switching from their old utility to this new utility, which is a solar installation on their rooftop. And so they're able to move and migrate over to solar without the capital expenditure that would otherwise be prohibitive for them. And they're still able to realize those cost savings. And so they're essentially outsourcing the financing to a class of investors. Now, the size of the market for single tenant owner occupied buildings within California with a small capacity for solar installation is about 800 million in the state of California. So this is a very sizable market. And for context, that's about 10% of the total market size for solar in California to date. So this is a non-trivial portion of the market, which right now does not have access to financing, does not really have realistic access to solar energy. So through this facility that we're creating, we are aiming to bring access to this group. Okay, so that's the problem statement. That's what we're looking to solve. So who is Lumen Energy? Lumen Energy, we are a technology-first company that's based in San Francisco. We are focused on, our initial focus was on profiling buildings. So we developed a proprietary technology that enables us to identify the buildings that are optimal for solar, and not only the buildings that are optimal for solar, but also the potential estimated savings based on a number of metadata about the buildings, everything from local incentives to building materials to building use type. There's a wide range of data points that we use within our model. We also work with national labs as well as Berkeley labs to get massive data sets of building information and energy usage information. So these are two organizations that are supported by the Department of Energy, the US Department of Energy. So we have a very vast and rich data set upon which to build our models that will allow us to do this energy profiling. So with this energy profiling, we're able to then better understand sort of the best offer that's available to these buildings. And then we also work to be a platform that connects both the financing as well as the installers with these customers so that it becomes a one-stop shop. And we serve as essentially an easy button or a concierge service so that instead of going through the complexity of having to walk through an installation, do RFPs, figure out the tech stack, identify the types of PV cells that you need, size the system yourself, doing all that work yourself, which is beyond the scope and the capacity, frankly, of a small building owner, particularly if you're a small business. We do all of that heavy lifting for companies. We identify, based on all of those factors, an optimal power purchasing agreement or energy subscription, and we procure the financing on behalf of the building owners to be able to then move forward with the installation. So that includes the underwriting, et cetera. So from Lumen itself, we've been in operation since March of 2020, and we raised a $4.5 million round in May of this year in order to accelerate our entrance into the market. And so we're leveraging this raise to accelerate the volume of building owners that we're in contact with, that we're creating these energy subscription models with, and are building these relationships with financiers to connect the financing with the energy buyers. And while our primary focus has been on buildings that are larger than 50 kilowatts in terms of installation capacity, like I said, we recognize that there is a massive market that is underserved, that is largely going to be untouched. And if we don't provide any kind of solution for them, they will be the very last holdouts to buildings that don't have solar energy or access to clean tech. Even as San Francisco and California is aggressively moving towards electrification, there's a huge number of buildings that are going to be left behind if we don't identify creative solutions like we found and connect with investors like those on Raise Green who are interested in looking to help finance these buildings. So in terms of our team, we have a deeply experienced team across finance, across energy, and across technology. So our two founders, Peter Light and Dave Cohen. Peter Light was a former founder of a renewable grid project within Google X. He's close to 2 decades involved in commercializing clean energy. Our other co-founder, Dave Cohen, has 10 plus years as an investor, as a financial analyst, as well as software development, has worked at SnapDocs, so he has deep experience within the mortgage financing industry, also business leadership within Stripe, so again, commercial financing industry, and then myself, strategy and operations experience both within Google in the technology space as well as within healthcare. So we have considerable experience developing and commercializing not only technology platforms, but also creating technology-driven transformations of deeply legacy industries from energy to healthcare. And we're bringing that with rigor and with speed and with precise design to this clean energy space. So in terms of what we do, like I mentioned, we work with building owners, help them connect with financing as well as installers to create and provide a concierge service for the implementation and installation of commercial and industrial solar. For the project fund itself, since we're focusing on small projects, this initial project fund is going to target up to 10 individual projects within the fund. So we're targeting anywhere from 250 to 350 total kilowatts of capacity. And this will help us unlock about $1 million worth of energy cost savings across the projects within this portfolio. In terms of projected revenue, the revenue that will come from this project fund will come from the power purchase agreements that we sign with the roughly 10 projects that we're bringing in to this project fund. That will be the cash flow that the energy subscriptions from these energy buyers will be providing. The expenses are going to be fairly low with this. I mean, it's largely going to be operations and maintenance, which is relatively low lift because, again, we're essentially scaling the O&M services across all of these 10 projects. They will be localized to California, so this is not at this point a nationwide endeavor. We're very geographically focused, which again helps us keep our operations and maintenance costs down. And our key milestones across this will be completing the solar installation for all of the power purchase agreements we've identified. So right now we have 2 that are on the process of being signed. We have a very robust pipeline of additional businesses that we're looking. Essentially, the quote unquote bottleneck at this point is the credit underwriting. So we're essentially ensuring that the energy buyers that we bring in have some level of vetting to ensure that they do have the capacity to pay going forward, so that we mitigate the overall portfolio risk for any investor that does invest in this project fund. And we will additionally be identifying institutional buyers for the project fund that will allow us to further capitalize this project following the term of this particular debt fund. And yeah, we anticipate a pretty strong impact for this. Like I said, over $1 million of potential energy cost savings that we're going to be driving with these businesses, in addition to standing up solar for businesses that otherwise would not be implementing solar, even if they would desire to do so. So at that point, that's our presentation. That's sort of an overview of our project and what we're looking to accomplish. And at this time, we're open to any questions that the audience might have.
Franz, why don't you take us through some questions?
Sure. Thank you, Shingi. Great presentation, and you evoked a number of questions. So we'll take it from the top here. Thad had a question about credit risk, and it was, how does Lumen assess credit risk for this large number of relatively small projects?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're basically adopting Moody's model for assessing small business credit risk. So it's a combination of historical payments and historical credit history. On top of that, there's also an assessment of the personal credit for the business owners themselves. And so combining these two components, we found that, at least not we, but following Moody's model, we found that the most effective way or the most accurate way to measure credit risk is to combine those two in an equal weighted algorithm to essentially then assess the likelihood of non-payment or the likelihood of payment outside of a 30-day window for a monthly payment scheme.
All right, and then I'm gonna bundle 2 quickly together here. One is Lumen only focused in the California market? And then a bigger question, why is Lumen Energy looking for crowdfunding, as they seem to have a good case for Series A venture capital funding? Is it to build community of crowd investing investors, or is the goal something else?
Yeah, so first question, Currently, yes, we are focused on California. By Q2 of next year, we will start to branch out into other markets. Currently, we're doing our research in terms of identifying sort of a combination of factors, including incentives, market growth, competitiveness in particular areas, capacity of financing, and a few other considerations that will help us understand which additional states we want to target next. So we will not forever only be California, but currently for this year, that's what our focus is. So for the second question around sort of why are we looking at financing? So there are a couple of dimensions to this. So part one is that it's a question of risk, right? There is a possibility, or there is the option of essentially raising venture financing to finance all of these projects. However, from a business perspective, the cost of doing this essentially via full equity would essentially be too expensive for us. So there's the question of dilution for existing stock owners in taking that approach. We would essentially dilute ourselves down to zero. But the other component to that is it would actually not make sense for us from a financial optimization perspective to go the venture funding route to finance these projects ourselves, in part because the tax equity incentives that exist would actually be cheaper and more effective for us to actually go to individual investors who serve as tax equity investors, who would then get the tax advantages of that, but would also provide a cheaper cost of capital from a dilution perspective in order to finance these projects. So that's why we don't do the venture funding route to finance the actual PPAs themselves. Now, that being said, there are individual projects in which we ourselves do balance sheet investments. In other words, we will essentially, Lumen, the company itself, will essentially be the tax equity investor. But those cases are primarily for deal flow on our end, and it's not part of a long-term strategy. So this is more about just being able to prove concept, getting deals done, and particularly for smaller deals, getting them done and getting through the door so we can get additional case studies, so we can prove the concept of being able to prove out our credit underwriting model and showing institutional investors that the credit risk is actually reasonable, and that the cost of capital that institutional investors are essentially pushing right now on these smaller projects is wholly unreasonable. And when I say cost of capital, I'm talking about anywhere from 9 to 11% is what we're seeing in some cases, which from a cost of capital perspective is frankly ridiculous for these small businesses, particularly if we're able to demonstrate that these businesses have pretty reasonable credit risk. So just to kind of reiterate that question, whole equity financing is too expensive because we dilute ourselves down to nothing, and essentially we will no longer own the Lumen business. It will entirely be venture capital owned, which is not our goal, because then we lose control of our company. Which is why we're looking at it from bringing in tax equity investors. From a debt fund perspective, or debt fund perspective with retail investors, the reason why we're looking at it from a crowdfunding perspective is, again, the cost of capital is significantly cheaper for these smaller projects than they would be if we were to target these larger institutional investors. Because here we're looking at much lower interest rates than we would be if we were to go with institutional investors. And that's important because the rate of interest of the financing helps determine ultimately how much savings we're actually able to provide for the actual power buyers when they switch to solar. Because if the savings are zero, or if it ends up being more expensive because of the cost of capital, again, we're not going to be able to make a persuasive case to these businesses to switch.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Is this approach similar to what other solar companies do for single family homes, where the owners don't purchase or lease the equipment, but instead sort of loan their roofs?
Yeah, that's essentially it. Yeah. So, I think, the definition of innovation is taking learnings from one space and applying it to another. And that's essentially what we're doing here with the commercial and industrial space, is that, historically, commercial and industrial building owners have been financing solar themselves, which is why so much of the market has essentially said, I'd love to do solar, but I don't have the CapEx, or I don't want to spend the CapEx, or other factors that prevent them essentially, or make them feel that it's prohibitive from a finance perspective. And so yes, this is essentially, they loan their roofs, an investor-owned utility company, quote unquote, is living on their roof, and they pay that utility company. So they just basically change their monthly payments from, in the case of Northern California, PG&E, to the utility company that's sitting on top of their roof.
Got it. Fascinating. All right, we are coming up on the end of our session. Shenge, thank you so much for your presentation and for taking questions. If I can ask all of the panelists to go back on camera as we wrap things up. I think what we'd love to do is give everyone a round of applause for their participation. I know it's not always easy to do public speaking, so Peter, Chaz, Shenge, thank you so much for your participation today. And we're gonna wrap things up. And again, if we didn't get to your questions, please make sure you visit invest.raisegreen.com, where you can feel free to ask each one of our panelists questions and they'll get back to you. Without further ado, I will turn things over to Franz as he can wrap things up for us.
Great. Well, yes, a big round of applause. Thank you for the great descriptions of your business, Shingi, Chaz, and Peter. As Antoine said, you can always go and ask in the Q&A section on the offering pages additional questions. I wanted to maybe end with just one quick rapid fire round before we close, which is to those that are on the line and are considering originating a project or selling securities in the manner that you three are working toward. Do you have any advice for them? And maybe a quick round robin of 30 seconds or less, quick response, and any last plugs, and then we will call it a day. Why don't we go in reverse order, and we'll start with you, Shingi.
So could you reframe the question? Didn't quite understand.
Sure, yeah. Any advice that you have to prospective originators who are considering using Raise Green to raise capital themselves?
Yeah, I think modeling is going to be really important. I think there's a popular phrase, brain damage, for the complexity of the modeling for making these deals work. I didn't really understand why people so frequently use that phrase until I started building out the financials for these kinds of deals. It does require a lot of creativity in a lot of different, depending on the sort of the angle that you're taking in terms of what you're trying to finance. In our case, for example, it takes a lot of creativity to figure out an offering that that meets everybody's needs, both the investors as well as the power buyers. So that's sort of, the advice there is really find folks that have experience with investment structuring, pick their brains, be humble, and just, be willing to be very, very flexible.
Excellent advice. Over to you, Chaz.
Yeah, I would just encourage, your investors to consider their direct social impact for local investing right now. You're value driven for, the purposes of community resilience and climate change solutions, and really put that as more of an emphasis really in, what your returns are. Maybe the returns measured in a little bit other method than just dollars, and consider that in your spreadsheet, and that will make a better planet, I hope.
All right, a strong suggestion for values-driven thinking, and thank you, Chaz, for the presentation today. And last word over to Peter for any advice that you have for folks considering doing an offering or investing in one. Oh, it sounds like we might have lost Peter, perhaps due to a connection issue, but well, with that, we will end on a high note. we've got a number of more questions flowing in here, but again, I would encourage folks who are asking those to go to invest.raisegreen.com, where you can check out the offering pages for each of these amazing companies and decide whether they are right for you to put your dollars into them. So with that, thank you all so much, and have a wonderful afternoon or late morning for those of you on the West Coast. Over and out, onwards and upwards. Thank you, everyone.
Franz.